Have you ever looked back on a moment in your life, maybe years ago, maybe just last month, and said to yourself, I should have seen that coming? You trusted someone. You gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a close friend, a neighbor, even someone in your own family. And then one day, without warning, something shifted. A cold shoulder, a broken promise, a silent betrayal. And the worst part? You start replaying every little moment, wondering where the signs were hiding. You're not alone. When we get hurt like that, especially later in life, it cuts deeper. We've lived long enough to know that loyalty is rare, and trust, real trust, is precious. So when someone breaks it, it's not just painful. It feels like the very foundation of what we believed in starts to crack. But what if I told you, most betrayals don't come out of nowhere? One of the most powerful insights about human nature is this. People often project their own integrity onto others. In simple terms, good people, honest, loyal people, assume others are the same. If you're the kind of person who keeps their word, tells the truth, and stands by those you love, you expect that in return. And that's beautiful. But it's also dangerous, because it leaves us wide open to those who don't live by the same code. You see, betrayal doesn't start with a knife in the back. It starts quietly. A strange look, a half-truth, an uneasy feeling you brush off. It builds over time, like a crack in the windshield that slowly spreads until everything shatters. And while you might not have noticed it back then, there were signs. Today, we're going to talk about those signs, not just as a way to look back, but as a way to protect your heart moving forward. Let's talk about the first one. And I want you to really think about this. Have you ever been around someone who just doesn't tell the whole truth? They don't lie, not exactly. But they also don't tell you everything either. Maybe they leave out key details. Maybe they change the subject when things get uncomfortable. A lie would make no sense unless the truth was felt to be dangerous. That hits home, doesn't it? Let's say you have a close friend. You tell them about your struggles, your hopes, your worries. You've trusted them for years. But over time, you realize they've been holding things back. They forgot to tell you about the conversation they had with someone who's never liked you. They didn't mention an event that involved you or something you should have known about. And when you finally bring it up, they brush it off with, "Oh, I didn't think it was important." But it was. And you know it. That's not just forgetfulness. That's deception through omission. People like this don't lie with words, they lie with silence. Because if you had the full picture, you might not stick around. You might question their loyalty. And they know it. So they hide behind half-truths to keep control. It can happen in relationships too. Imagine you ask your partner who they were with the night before, and they pause just a little too long. Then they mention a few names, but not the one they really don't want you to hear. They make you feel like you're the one overreacting for asking. But something deep inside you knows. They weren't being straight with you. The truth is, withholding information is a power move. It keeps you one step behind. That's why, when you feel like someone's not telling you everything, not once, but repeatedly, that's not a coincidence. That's a crack forming. Now on the flip side, let's talk about something that seems innocent, something even flattering at first, but might actually be the second sign of betrayal. Have you ever met someone who praises you just a little too much? They call you amazing, smart, inspiring, over and over again. They agree with everything you say, laugh at all your jokes, tell you that you're the best thing that's happened to them. Feels good, right? But then suddenly, you feel a shift. That same person who couldn't stop complimenting you now gives you the cold shoulder, or worse, turns on you when you don't give them what they want. That's because their flattery wasn't real. It was strategy. It was a way to lower your guard. Someone once said something that sounds strange at first. A particularly beautiful woman is a source of terror. A beautiful woman is a terrible disappointment. But what they meant wasn't about beauty itself. It was about the danger of false appearances, when something seems too good to be true, and we ignore the nagging voice that says, "This doesn't feel real." Let me give you an example. You start a new volunteer position or club, and someone immediately takes an interest. They're kind, they're supportive, they treat you like royalty. You think, wow, I've made a real friend here. But then, just a few weeks in, they start asking for little favors. And then bigger ones. And when you set a boundary, suddenly that warmth turns into coldness. Their kindness wasn't kindness at all, it was currency. And you just stopped paying. Real respect, real admiration, doesn't need to be over the top. It doesn't flood you with praise and then punish you for not giving something in return. If someone only lifts you up to pull you down later, they were never lifting you up to begin with. And that brings us to a hard truth. People don't change just because they say they will. You are what you do, not what you say you'll do. Actions reveal character far more than promises ever will. When someone betrays another, cheats on a partner, turns on a friend, stabs a colleague in the back, we want to believe it was just a mistake. A one-time thing. Especially if they're good to us. Especially if we care about them. But history tells a different story. Betrayal is almost never a one-time act. It's a pattern. Think about it. Someone who talks behind their best friend's back, who gossips, who cheats, who hides things. Do you really think you'll be the one person they won't do that to? That's the trap. We think we're different, that we're special. But what we're really doing is ignoring the fire alarm because we don't want to leave the house. I've seen it happen, people investing time, trust, even money, into someone with a long track record of disloyalty. The signs were there, but love, or hope, or habit made them turn a blind eye. And then, when it happens again, the heartbreak isn't just from the betrayal, it's from the regret. So how do we protect ourselves? Not by being suspicious of everyone, not by shutting ourselves off from connection, but by listening to what people do, not just what they say, by paying attention to consistency, and by trusting that little voice inside us, that quiet voice that often knows the truth before our mind is willing to admit it. Sometimes, betrayal doesn't look like a grand act. It doesn't come with a loud bang or a dramatic confrontation. It can be quiet, subtle, so much so that by the time you realize what's happening, the damage is already done. That's why this next sign is one of the most overlooked and the most dangerous of them all. You see, someone who is going to betray you doesn't always come in like a storm. Often, they come in like a gentle breeze, slowly chipping away at your confidence, your peace, and even your sense of self. It starts with a joke, a little jab. Something they say in front of others, maybe with a chuckle. Oh, don't ask her, she's always running late. You're trying that again? Well, good luck this time. It's said with a smile. Maybe they even add, just teasing. But you feel it. The sting. The way your spirit shrinks just a little. And if it keeps happening, over time, you begin to wonder if maybe they're right. It's often said that the unconscious always leaks through. A person's true feelings, whether it's envy, resentment, or disdain, will slip out in the smallest ways. A joke that doesn't land. A compliment that feels a little too sharp around the edges. You see, undermining doesn't always look hostile. Sometimes it's wrapped in kindness. Have you ever had someone offer a compliment that just didn't sit right with you? You actually look really nice today. Or, you're smarter than you seem. At first, you might even thank them. But then later, you sit with it and realize, that wasn't a compliment. That was a cut dressed up in pretty words. We call those backhanded compliments. And they're designed to confuse you, to plant tiny seeds of self-doubt while making the other person seem generous or supportive. But make no mistake, those seeds, if left unchecked, grow roots. Then there's the so-called helpful advice. You share a dream, a goal, or even just a new hobby you're excited about, and they respond with, "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Or, "That seems a bit much for someone your age." And maybe you laugh it off. Maybe you say, "Well, they're just being realistic." But are they? It's true that the people around us can either lift us higher or pull us down without ever laying a hand on us. The ones who love you, really love you, will challenge you, yes. But they'll never discourage you from being your best, or trying something new, or shining a little brighter. Sometimes the people who undermine us aren't even fully aware they're doing it. They've buried their own insecurities so deep that the only way they can feel safe is by keeping you small. And if they sense you rising, getting stronger, happier, more independent, they'll start to chip away again. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because your growth threatens their control. And that brings us to another red flag that can be even more frustrating. When someone keeps testing your loyalty over and over again, but never shows you theirs. Have you ever had a friend or partner who constantly made you prove yourself? Who asked things like, "Would you still love me if..." or "Are you really on my side?" And no matter how many times you reassured them, it was never enough. That's not just insecurity, it's a setup. See, someone who's truly loyal doesn't need constant validation. They trust. They give space. They build, not chip away. But a person who's preparing to betray you, they want you to jump through hoops. They want to see how much you'll tolerate, how far you'll bend. And meanwhile, they rarely, if ever, offer the same in return. There's a powerful insight worth remembering. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When someone keeps accusing you of being disloyal, you have to stop and ask, are they really talking about you, or are they revealing something about themselves? Let's say you've been nothing but loyal to a friend. You've stood by them through thick and thin. And yet the moment you get busy or spend time with someone else, they question you. They guilt you. They act like you've abandoned them. But look closer. Have they shown up for you the way you've shown up for them? Do they keep your confidence, support your wins, respect your time? Or is all the loyalty expected from you but never given back? Or maybe you've been in a romantic relationship like this. You've been faithful, honest, and supportive. But they still make little comments that question your commitment. They get jealous easily. They want constant proof that you're not like the others. And yet, when you need them, they disappear. They don't show up. They forget important things. That's not a relationship, that's emotional blackmail. Even in the workplace, this shows up. A manager might say, "I need to know you're really on this team." But when you need a day off or support on a hard task, they're nowhere to be found. What they really mean is, "I want to know how much I can ask of you without giving anything back." The truth is, real loyalty doesn't need to be tested. It reveals itself over time through quiet consistency, through showing up, through honesty. If someone keeps demanding your loyalty without ever earning it, that's not love or friendship. It's manipulation. And manipulation, when left unchecked, leads to the deepest kind of betrayal. The kind that doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your trust in yourself. Because here's what often happens. When someone betrays us, we don't just question them. We question our own judgment. We ask ourselves, how did I not see it? How did I let this happen? And sometimes the hardest thing to recover isn't the relationship. It's our ability to trust ourselves again. But what if I told you? You did see it. There's one more sign we need to talk about. One that doesn't come from them. It comes from you. And it might be the most important one of all. Sometimes the most powerful warning doesn't come from something someone says or does. It doesn't come from a joke or a missing detail or even a broken promise. It comes from a feeling. A subtle tension in your chest. A little whisper inside that says, something's not right. We've all felt it. Maybe you couldn't explain it. Maybe everything on the surface looked fine, But deep down, something about that person or that situation just didn't sit right. And you pushed it down, told yourself you were being too sensitive, or paranoid, or judgmental. But your intuition knew. It's often said that our subconscious mind is always gathering information, long before our conscious mind catches up. Those instincts, those quiet gut-level reactions, are shaped by millions of tiny clues: facial expressions, body language, tone of voice, energy shifts. You might not notice them consciously, but your body does. Your heart does. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt drained? Or met someone who said all the right things, smiled at the right times, and yet something about them just felt off? That's not imagination. That's not emotion. That's recognition. Your inner wisdom picking up on something the surface hasn't revealed yet? There's a striking thought worth sitting with. The reason for evil in the world is that people are not able to tell their stories. This isn't about storytelling in the usual sense. It's about the parts of ourselves we don't fully understand. Our fears, our insecurities, our envy, our darker motives. When we avoid facing those parts, they don't disappear. They leak out in other ways, through manipulation, deception, even betrayal. Now here's the real danger. Many people are very good at hiding who they are. They learn to perform kindness, to imitate sincerity, to offer just enough warmth to win your trust. But beneath it all, their shadow, the part of themselves they refuse to acknowledge, is running the show. And it's that shadow that will eventually harm you. The good news? You don't have to wait until the damage is done. You can catch it early. But only if you trust yourself. Only if you stop dismissing that little knot in your stomach. Only if you stop telling yourself, "I'm probably just overthinking." You're not overthinking. You're noticing. Let me ask you something personal. Have you ever looked back on a friendship or a relationship and remembered a moment, maybe even the first meeting, where you felt unsure? Where something didn't quite click, but you ignored it? Maybe because they were charming, or they had a good story, or you didn't want to seem rude, and then months or even years later, when they betrayed you, that moment came rushing back. That's your intuition. That's your early warning system. And it's time to start listening to it. Let me tell you about a woman I once spoke with. She was in her early 70s, widowed, and had recently started seeing someone new. He was charismatic, kind, well-dressed. Said all the right things. Her friends liked him. Her family was cautious, but polite. But she told me, "I don't know why, but every time I'm with him, I feel just a little bit smaller." She couldn't explain it. He didn't insult her, didn't shout or demand. But over time, she began to realize something powerful. She was always the one adjusting to him. Her schedule, her opinions, even her boundaries. And when she started to say no more often, his tone changed. The compliments stopped. The charm turned cold. And that was when she knew. Her intuition had been right all along. There's a quiet courage in listening to yourself, especially when no one else sees what you see, especially when you don't have proof. But in this season of life, after all you've lived through, all the lessons, all the heartaches, you've earned the right to trust your gut. And maybe that's the real message here. It's not just about spotting the signs in others. It's about coming home to your own wisdom. Because betrayal, as painful as it is, often reveals more than just someone else's character. It reveals how much we've been ignoring our own. So let's take a breath together. We've talked about people who hide the truth, who flatter to manipulate, who carry patterns of betrayal, who slowly erode our confidence, who expect loyalty they don't return, and who trigger that quiet feeling that something isn't right. And if you've seen even one of these signs in your own life, I want you to hear me clearly. It's not your fault. You're not naive. You're not weak. You're human. And your trust, your love, your loyalty, your belief in others is not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. But from this moment on, you also have the tools to protect that trust, to guard it wisely, to give it not just freely, but intentionally. And when you see the signs, when someone hides things, praises you too much, or makes you feel small, you don't have to wait for the betrayal. You can act. You can step back. You can draw that boundary. And yes, it might feel lonely at first, especially when you've cared deeply. But I promise you this, peace is better than fake loyalty. Peace is better than walking on eggshells. Peace is better than wondering if today is the day the other shoe will drop. You deserve relationships that feel steady, safe, honest. You deserve people who show up, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Who don't play games with your trust. Who don't test your loyalty like it's some kind of contest. Who make you feel seen, heard, and cherished, not just sometimes, but all the time. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question. One you can carry into your next conversation, your next new connection, even the next time you look in the mirror. Does this feel true? Not look true? Not sound true? But feel true? Because that feeling, that's your compass. That's your truth. That's your power. And at this point in your life, you don't need to give that away to anyone. Thank you for spending this time with me. If something in this resonated, if you've been through this or are going through it now, I'd be honored to hear your story in the comments. We're not alone in these experiences. And sometimes, just sharing can lift the weight off your chest. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next one. We've got more deep, meaningful conversations coming your way. Until next time, stay wise, stay kind, and most of all, stay true to you.